Letting someone else's thoughts be your thoughts is not the way to do it. Arguing with someone else's thoughts is letting their thoughts be yours. Those who want to help with a serious point to make are like a nurse with a needle, salmonella on its tip. Seriousness in the life of the ordinary is ridiculous for the simple reason that there's nothing serious in the life of the ordinary. Notice said, no talking in class, addressed to all lifelong students. Ballistics. The older prince told one of the younger knights, it's not the external bombs that will kill you, but the internal BBs. How the civilized world of man survives. When an illusion is all illusion, none see it as such. As is the nature of true creativity, the world's grandest buildings, statues, and paintings are never seen. They exist only in some man's mind. Two views, a local one and one not so local. Talking to yourself can cause time to go by more quickly. Talking to yourself causes time. A quietly suspicious man is the beginning of a more perceptive one. The de facto mayor of the sleazy stretch of car lots and strip joints told some of his fellow proprietors that having a consciousness that is not constantly supported by an inner running commentary can be quite dangerous. This was actually a type of trick, even test item, if you will. For although it can sound solidly based, correct, and even titillating, no such thing occurs outside the ordinary simplistic religious myths. There is no morality to progress, and only children can be led to believe otherwise. From ground level, the horizon can oft appear foreboding, but the alive stand on ladders. Henry, proof in the research, proof in the trial. Your own DNA is the original and best evidence. As with all things in a three-dimensional world, sound too has a binary basis. You can either be concerned with making sound, talking, or receiving it, listening. A warrior's best approach is to forget about talking, and especially about talking about talking. Footnote, the operational profit experienced herein gave original rise to the concept of humility. In one land, under secret cover of overnight darkness, the circus just outside town was switched for the town, and the town placed out where the circus had been. And who do you think was ever the wiser? Whenever the simple of mind do try to think about their position, the first thing they generally think is that they've been hoodwinked. Of what use to a hack is a rewrite. Wasn't labeled as such, but our religious thought for the day. Civilization and demons, dragons. Civilization and dragons. From life's local view, the great thing about imaginary foes is that they can never be conclusively conquered. To be of ordinary awareness is to be sick amidst the sea of sickness. Well, adrift in wellness. But not much more than that. Men are not limited by their height, their weight, their strength, but by their consciousness. So are they confined and defined as man. But also do they possess a singular potential. To begin to breathe, the mind must speak. To avoid asphyxiation, it must eventually shush. What drives normal, noisy noses out of whack It's a statement. What drives normal, noisy noses out of whack? The smell of the illusionarily repellent. What drives normal, noisy noses out of whack? The smell of the illusionarily repugnant. In certain other professions, this is known also as the engine of civilization. For those of you interested in writing and literature, one man got so good that he could think as fast as he could think. If there are actually ever on this planet men with a mission, one possible way to identify them is that they'll never mention it. One man turned an unused area of his mind into a used car lot. Okay, I'll tell you the truth. The area wasn't actually inactive, but he decided he wanted to put it to another use. A quickie lesson. Christianity is to General Motors as Chevrolet is to civilization. Play or us. Who but a child would dress up in a Superman costume, then run out on the playground and announce that he's Superman? Out the inner life. A busy man's a happy man. Originally, knights made their helmets cover even the lower portion of their face so that they couldn't speak. Just goes to show that even in the mythical realm, things go from the literal to the symbolic and back again. After hearing that the way to sculpt a lion is to chisel from the stone all that's unlion-like, one man undertook the same with himself. In the mythical realm, one way to go about developing your own true personal is by being, up till then, impersonal. One day, one guy, since he knew it wouldn't go any further, mentioned to his dog, the actual difference between enlightenment and bullshit is probably too slim to measure. Why theoretical battles are superior to actual ones. If you kill a man physically, he's dead and that's the end of it. But if you overcome him today verbally, he'll be available again tomorrow to kick around. Education. Paying someone else to do research for you. Religion. Paying someone else to worry for you. Being grown. Being faced with another 50 or 60 years of having to pay other people to have fun for you. Another mother of all myths. Once everyone was young, then childish, then set upon, then tutored, then turned out, then taken to be matured and taken out and shot in the consciousness. I could say, why let this happen to you? But if you're sane and healthy, it's already too late. It already has. The only pertinent question possible now is, where might I go from here? And do note that to this the ordinary would reply, downhill, to the grave, which is precisely not the response of the unbungled few. How works the matter of luck and good fortune in the life of ordinary mortals? A lucky man is a lucky man. After having lived a long life amidst the collective, one man finally said, isn't it getting a bit repetitious in here? More from the world of lit. Definition. A drivelist. A city author unmasked. At best, the ordinary believe that they should alter their inner commentary and thus improve it, while to a more suspicious man, this doesn't begin to approach improvement. For those of you disappointed by the earlier item regarding man and luck, this. If roaches do cause stupidity, then perhaps pollen brings eternal happiness. Nodding toward politics as an example, one man offers this observation. The difference between the beasts of the jungle and man the civilized is that with the animals, the strongest take charge, while with man, it is the dumbest. But further note of man's superiority is that in spite of this, he continues to reign supreme. One man continued to jog his neural activities with the reminder that anything capable of further development is, by definition, forever incomplete. Punctuation and the single night. If everyone else uses a regular period to conclude their thoughts, then the more alert use a really abrupt one. An artist who desires acceptance and recognition pursues the wrong pursuit. At any given moment, not talking to yourself is one of life's great little secrets to have. In the city, everything's a gambit, a ploy. The metaphysical history of one people. They first worshiped the sun, then the seasons, then the sound of thunder, and eventually silence. The law of the jungle. If animals could be entertained, they'd be people too. There is a difference between an example and a metaphor. An example is a metaphor for people who don't need metaphors. As regards a night's reconnaissance consciousness, for a clear view, any comment is too much comment. The gist of the whittling down. He cut out the complaining. He cut out the asking. He cut out the praising. Then he cut out. Further pertinence to chivalrous vision. The unmoving eye is one of life's saddest sights. Armchair warriors dream of slaying a multitude of foes. Real ones wish only to quiet them. As with all things original and creative, expanded consciousness comes from no place known, serving purposes unclear to Philistines. Deep within the castle, hidden well within one night's obscure room, was this reminder. There are dangerous blows possible to the tongue, and cuts unkind to the ear. Thus our best approach remains, don't talk and don't listen either. A more awakened man's consciousness is like the calm in the eye of a storm, and the calm in the eye of a storm, and the calm in the eye of an apparent storm. A neural warrior's son asked him, can you actually stop thought? You can treat it so non-significantly as to accomplish the same thing. The sheriff waved his weapon menacingly in the air and bellowed out the warning. Don't let sundown catch any of you cliches still in my town. Well, an example of other differences between how the mind would want to look at things, how people do collectively, and what is possible as a starting place from someone of a non-routine attitude. We've already mentioned, it's no great secret, the oldest literature, scratched records, recollections of man showing any signs of some spirituality and etc. was like early man the farmers celebrating the change of seasons, specifically spring. The father of all the resurrection stories. For all you religious people. The resurrection of life itself returning, which you've got to remember if you look at in this kind of cartoonish, sequential sense of history. early man / farmers having to work daily for sustenance, having to live by the land, literally, with no A&Ps or Safeways, no food stamps. Then you can see, not to overdo it, but you could take a very crude detailing of it and say that somewhere along the line some men thought that when winter came around, life had deserted them. The sun changed, at least in Western Europe, which is the background of most of you viewers, that the shift in the Earth's axis was such that the sun almost looks like it's trying to get away from it. It gets cold, and etc., and you can't grow anything. And then spring comes back around. Now there is the original. You've got to see it as a paradigmatic, whether it be literal or not, so no consequence, celebration of a resurrection story, not of some man, not of some hero that died, but the resurrection of life itself. Two people were talking. One of them pointed out just what I said, and the other person said, yeah, that's kind of funny, that's kind of interesting about life, because the wiser I get, the older I get, I realize that nature itself in some way is always reflecting something about the higher spiritual nature of the universe. Think about it. Now, from a more childlike view, that certainly has validity. It is a very old story. Right? As soon as they got through celebrating the first year or two of celebrating spring, I assure you that somebody came up with the idea, some guy that was having trouble with the farm or got tired of working all the time, and decided, I'll come up with a new occupation, I'll become a priest. Nobody knew what it was, but he thought, at least I don't have to get out there and break my damn back. And so shortly after the celebration of the resurrection of life itself, the resurrection of the seasons, the planting time, I assure you that somebody came up with a metaphor, a symbolic story of man himself dying. They could have started out very gradual and subtly over a period of hours, weeks, years, doesn't matter, that our anticipation, our sensation, us personally, of life dying back a few months ago when it got cold, you remember that, yeah, and that smoke came, yeah, we couldn't plant, yeah. But then, not only did spring come back and life itself returned to us in abundance and possibilities of us being able to plant and live again, also our expectations, our attitude toward life, rather than us having the terminal winter blues, our spirits, our expectations were also resurrected. And so from that it became a short story, a short step to one of these priests coming up with a new idea, or somebody going, well, yes, there's some people over the hill there that they had a great leader, like our great leader, Ungald. They had one over there, and he died, and he was so strong, he actually came back to life. They went over there, and the women wept on his grave or something, and after a few days, he came back to life. No knock on religion, because it is just one aspect of man's civilized world, but you must see to take such stories as that at that level is the most simplistic way and the most unprofitable, the most jejune, it's like cheap cane sugar. I mean, you're going to suck all the juice out in about 5 minutes, then you're left with another 55 years and some odd hours going around with this kind of dried out thing trying to suck something out of it, and it's all gone. In other words, to take the idea literally is no more than a comfort blanket. It is no more than sucking on your thumb. It's tranquilizers without the need for prescriptions, I guess. But back to where we were talking. You understand when I gave you this made-up conversation between two people, that one of them had said what I opened up saying, describing how man originally had to have celebrated, that it had to come about more or less that he was celebrating the return of spring, that he could plant and again, based upon his last year, apparently then expect that he can plant, grow crops again if fate and the weather's favorable to him, and live again, be able to feed his family and survive. And it was a great celebration all over the world, not just Western Europe, but the spring equinox, the return of spring, wherever they decide it, all over the world are records of them celebrating it. I mean, it's just natural as hell. Oh, you got to think about it a second. And so this man was pointing that out. The guy in my conversation, my made-up dialogue, he was pointing that out and saying that was the father. That had to be the father of all resurrection stories. From that sprang all the ones of, the Jesus and the many resurrections and reincarnations of Buddhas and everyone else. That there is the father of it all was the celebration of the actual resurrection in their mind of life itself. Not some guy, not some person, not some theory, not some idea, not some philosophy, but life itself to them. And the other guy thinks about it. He goes, yeah. Now here's the other guy. This is representing the mainstream of humanity. He says, yeah, the older I get, which they equate with wiser, of course. He says, the older I get, I too realize everything in nature. Now he's referring to spring, the change of season. Everything in nature actually reflects some higher spiritual reality. Now out in the mainstream, that, especially with a good hand gesture, almost approaches a little higher than just the median or the mainstream of religious thought. It almost aspires to just a teensy bit of philosophical insight, as opposed to just saying, yeah, I believe in the Bible or the Quran, whatever it said, I take it as fact. The second guy sounds as though he is almost on the verge of making a small, non-dogmatic observation. That is, he says, yes, I've reflected on my own, the older I get, that nature in some way seems to symbolize, is constantly sending out this kind of symbolic or metaphorical representation of higher truths. You understand what I'm saying? If you don't, I'll go ahead and make it crude. The second person is saying, yeah, isn't that strange the way God, let's take the Western idea of God and all that. He's saying, yeah, isn't that really interesting? Or I begin to see it. God has arranged everything, all the way, especially down to this planet where, the important activities going on, that is, me and you. That God has arranged it where spring, the seasons change instead of just being every day, the 4th of July on Daytona Beach. That he makes it gets cold and then warm, and then cooler and then overclouded. No, but spring. So the second guy's responding to the first part. He says, but isn't it something how God has made nature itself reflect a great higher spiritual truth? In other words, he's saying, isn't it strange how God made spring come back around to give us kind of a physical representation of Jesus dying, being crucified and dying and then coming back to life. You do understand that aspires almost, with ordinary minds, it would pass as being, that's more than just a very parochial attitude of, again, just using Christianity, since that's the common denominator of most of you. The person can say, well, that you would think, well, he is even getting a little closer than just that kind of provincial view of taking religion absolutely, literally. That he's even trying to see a little bit more and saying, well, isn't that something? To help teach us humans some kind of great spiritual or higher spiritual lesson, God even arranged the change of the seasons. I mean, all this thing about the planets and putting us in the right place with the sun and at the right attitude turn and the axis changing to where it gives just enough change in season, but not enough to kill us so we don't go continually into an ice age and then into a burning, but just enough. And he did it for one reason, so we'd have spring and remind us that his son, Jesus, was crucified and came back to life just like spring. Which all sounds fine if you don't think about it, a lot. You get the point, I assume. Well, that was really also, I was just showing again how sequential sense of time even breaks down when people, as they are supposed to, want to stare, because staring is the comment. Staring is the conclusion. I don't hear more. Yes. But beyond the specifics, that was a little sidetrack whether you got it, which is of no great importance, but it's that ordinary people will accept the fact that, yes, Jesus died and was crucified before spring ever happened. But then he came along and made spring to help remind us. Well, plus Easter sales, I guess. I was leaving that out. Started inspiring the commercial level of society to bring on Easter sales and cut down on some of the fashionable clothes and perhaps pillowcases or whatever they do at that time of year to help remind us that Jesus, died and came back to life. Back to the main. That besides the non-sequential nature of my second man saying, yes, nature, God arranges nature to remind us of things, they say, and not just my man, but that represents it all, collective consciousness, even at its best, trying to wax metaphorical and allegorical, will take, in a sense, just the opposite approach. That they will say, well, isn't it something that nature, and I know that people end up using nature in all sorts of ways. How about just point blank reality? I say, just life. Right now with no adjectives, no modifiers, but just point blank, clerical life. No religious intent, no polymorphic, no anthropomorphic intent, just life, just existence. Collective, ordinary minds through the collective sight, they will look at reality and say, is that not metaphorical of some great higher spiritual truth? That is not spring symbolic of great religious heroes, even if they weren't Christian, but of the how about just the resurrection of man's soul? Because most religions believe that in some way or another. Isn't spring, isn't it interesting? Isn't it even almost touching, heartwarming, that the fates, the gods, arranged reality so that it would metaphorically remind us of a higher spiritual truth? As always, in a three-dimensional consciousness world being run by binary energy, it's just the opposite. It's not true, but notice, if the starting place should be almost the opposite. And consciousness will hear it, ordinary consciousness, in exactly the way that nature, isn't it something nature reflects higher spiritual truths? I mean, do you understand why I went through all this? It's not to attack anybody, as you know, but it's to show that the way that the mind is driven at the ordinary level, that anybody that would aspire, if you looked up the definition of think, even in a cheap dictionary from Kroger or somewhere, if you look up the definition of think, what they just did, I mean, it's closer to, Brockwurst than it is think. It does not fit the definition of think. All right, how about insight? Well, how about good thought, if that was in the dictionary? Yeah. In other words, for the ordinary mind to look at life, well, they normally won't say nature, remember, to look at spring and say, spring, how about that? Spring is allegorical, is a metaphor for the resurrection of man's soul, a higher spiritual truth. When just by any ordinary, their own definition of thing, not mine, I'll go by theirs, in any dictionary, they would have to go with the whole idea of a higher spiritual truth as a metaphor for what they'd already observed about life. I was afraid it'd be too subtle. But remember, I already had a guy point out to his dog that he was beginning to suspect that the difference between enlightenment and bullshit may be too slim to measure. Some of you evidently were too fat to get through that. Let me make it crude again, or cruder. But the reason we're trying to do it subtly and gradually is so that minds that might be on more childish hold tonight for some reason, so that you would immediately jump to the opposite conclusion. Aha, yes, everybody's wrong and what you're saying is right. But it's consider this. I'm just using one great example that's worldwide, the resurrection of man's soul or the resurrection of a hero. They've all got that. And they want to say, ordinary minds, no matter what religion, no matter what culture, no matter when or where on this planet, they will want to say, isn't it something about nature, that is, the ordinary running of life, that it continually reflects, metaphorically, some higher spiritual truth? When the mind made up the higher spiritual truth based upon the natural reality. You don't have to take that as an attack on religion. What's an attack on, if you see it, is it's an attack on your stupidity. All right, an attack on your intelligence. I was trying to give you an easy way out. Life is arranged in such a way through man, we're dealing, again, above the bio-survival level, beyond the physical level, beyond the level that we have in common with our fellow hippos and chimpos and wolfos. Up here, it's all invented. It is all non-essential insofar as you could physically survive. So up here, we're dealing with a concocted world. Absolutely invented, all the way from religion to the name spring. I don't mean Bruce, I'm talking about the change of seasons. It is absolutely invented, and so in that case, it is all, in a sense, a metaphor. Or if you want to be technical, it's really a symbol as opposed to a metaphor. That all words are symbols. And all words describing reality, it's not that there is no reality, but man's invented world, compared to eating, screwing, sleeping, surviving, this is all a metaphor. But then it becomes a metaphor for a metaphor. It becomes symbolism of symbolism, and no one sees it. And they take the immediate approach of, yes, isn't it strange? Isn't it interesting? Isn't it inspiring? Isn't it uplifting to see that nature has arranged itself in such a way, to wit, the change of seasons, to symbolically remind us of the resurrection of Jesus. One more time, not either right or wrong, but if they could think in any way, if you could get outside that kind of grip, you'd go, wait a minute. It would make more sense. Understated, I submit. Wouldn't it make a lot more sense to go, wait a minute. People made up the idea that some hero like Jesus died and was resurrected based upon what they'd already observed about the return of spring. Well, notice even you people, it just kind of, and we'll assume the best, you're just kind of nonplussed. But take ordinary people. And I don't mean just for the sake of making the stringently religious angry, but if you just told that to people that had no particular religious fervor in their lives, they'd go, well, I don't know. You know, there's got to be more to it than that. There's got to be some sort of psychological dynamics at play there. I don't know. Or they may even say, well, hell, anybody that's religious is psychotic. So, you know, what do I care? I want to pull out one from last time, more or less, that said that there were different kinds of entertainment. And I mentioned in the item dumbing entertainment and supportive entertainment. But let me be a little more specific. I could cut it up into all kinds of ways. But now entertainment, we're talking about anything that is non-essential for survival. We're talking about the civilized world. We're talking about everything from art to literal entertainment to religion to philosophy. Anything that is singular to man is a form of entertainment as opposed to a form of necessity. Now, there are different kinds of entertainment. And we're now, as always, when the mechanical parade moves on, we have access to more forms of entertainment than did our poor forefathers. But it still is easily and profitably broken down into certain general categories. There is dumbing entertainment. Dumbing entertainment, slasher movies. Music apparently celebrating, glamorizing violence. Literature glamorizing violence. Anything, now I ain't going to lay on this because somebody suddenly turned this on, they'd think it was some sort of cultural criticism. But you should just simply know. And that doesn't mean that you might not get a few beers yourself and get up and dance to the music, because you can always turn off the lyrics in your head if you know how to do it. But there is an entertainment that is a dumbing. It is a kind of regressive. Now, life does not allow it to the point, on a wide scale, that it actually is retro to the point that it takes large segments. If we're going to get technical, every now and then it does, but notice what happens to them when they really got a hand. Life will let go for a while until it notices, and then it's like, you know, Rex the Wonder Horse counts to 1. And suddenly this group of people who are, hey, people say, whatever happened to them? You know. But there is, now all of this, seeing it overlaps also, just because I'm making up these categories, dividing it up, it continually overlaps and shifts. But I was just using slasher movies, is what they were called. You know what I'm talking about. But anything that actually, taken in toto, that if you would sit there, if a person sits there, and it makes them, in fact, enjoy. I can't resist, I'm going to bring up one from several nights ago that I slipped in on, just sort of a preface to this, that I got nothing but blank looks, even, and there might not have been anyone here. that I point out there is a kind of civilization, and the way I put it, my suggestion is what I'd already suspected before I did it, which is one of the reasons that you thought I put it down backwards. I said that there is a form of civilization in which they attempt to transplant Wilson Pickett's head on the body of Bach. I don't know whether I picked the wrong example, surely not. Wilson, besides being one of the world's great soul singers, is not known as Mr. Charming. He seems prone every year or so to be arrested for certain violent acts, uncontrollable behavior, a propensity to partake of the grape. But see, I bet some of you would have thought, if you were listening at all in the kind of descriptions I've used, that I would have said, well, wait, civilization is the attempt to take the head of Bach and transplant it on the body of a Wilson Pickett. To take a Schweitzer's head and put it on the body of Attila the Hun. Easy, easy. Cheap, simple. There's a form of entertainment, which is what I'm talking about now, a form of attempted civilization, in which, because it's regressive, it is dumbing entertainment, that they attempt to put the head of Nero onto the body of St. Augustine. See, not the other way around. That is now, didn't cost me a lot to type that up a few nights ago, but that was what that was about, and I did not have it backwards. That's why I didn't stop and look around and give you any hint. That is dumbing entertainment. It has always been around. It's nothing new, and it's not related to Bach or Wilson Pickett. It's not related to Baroque or soul music. It has to do with the non-ending parade that can slightly back up, because you can be in the middle of this huge parade of man's civil march forward. And inside that parade, as you know, going on, you got not just a little parade here. We're going to have to get symbolic or metaphorical. Then, if you want to be technical again, damn you. We're talking about 6 billion people in this parade. Not just 2,000 or 3,000 like Macy's Thanksgiving, but imagine that. But even that, something you can look at, you could be watching on TV, and at any given time comes by the width of the Fifth Avenue there. Let's say that at any given time there might be 20 people abreast, more or less, clowns, guys on stilts, somebody on a horse, and they're all going forward. The parade is. But you know inside the parade, suddenly, one of the clowns can turn around and walk back this way, go sideways. 2 or 3 of them can stop and do some flips. In other words, they can go backwards inside the parade. But that parade's going on. I mean, if they keep on trying to go that way, they're finally going to get somebody going to say, hey, I believe that's Rex the Wonder Horse. I think the elephant brigade's going to walk all over us. Why don't we go back another direction? And they think, good thinking, and they go. But there is a form of dumbing entertainment. Now remember, entertainment, we're talking about anything that goes on, not just entertainment as you would normally, as ordinary people might call it. It can be literature, it can be religious thought, it can be political thought, it can be economic theory, but it is dumbing. It is retrogressive. It is the attempt, and it never takes over the parade, but it is a little small attempt in there to put the head of Wilson Pickett on the body of Bach. In its lesser forms, it continually pops up in a more civil manner, if that sounded too strong, is the idea of the noble savage. That we are too civilized, and how come somebody doesn't go dig up Rousseau's body or one of his grandsons, and we got to get out of this. We're too civilized. We're getting genteel to the point that we're becoming intellectually or spiritually impotent. We're becoming a nation too civilized or a people too civilized. That is dumbing entertainment. Well, if you want to be real technical, all of you should figure this out. As long as you don't take it seriously, it's of no consequence, but almost all popular entertainment is, and remember it all overlaps, but is by and large dumbing. Let me take back by and large, because I was going to give you No, I wasn't going to do what you're going to say. I wasn't going to say forget the by and large. I was going to shade it a little bit. So let me withdraw by and large, let me give you another category. It's in large part, but rather than say by and large, let me give you another category. Slip in. There's one that is, I'll go ahead and call it supportive. I did last time. It is a kind of bland, non-intrusive entertainment, and its main job is the supporting of, the defense of the status quo. Now again, not just literally, I'm going to describe it literally so it'll sound as though there is a distinction between that and the one I just named and the one I was getting to. But it is so overlapped, all you got to do is turn your head for a little bit, and it just all runs together. But that would be your basic humane cultural forms of entertainment. It would be the mainstream religion of wherever you are. It would be, it's the middle class. It would be, let us say, the symphony. Not that the symphony under any conditions objectively is any better than a good outdoor fest with Wilson and J.B. But speaking in the mainstream, it would be those things that seem to be supportive of the status quo. And the status quo always in the middle of life's march is the current best picture of civilization. It is man's best picture at any given time right there. And so that kind of entertainment, let's call it defensive. It is supportive of the status quo. It is specifically supportive of being civilized, as opposed to, let's don't go back and be regressive. It is the voice of the middle class, wherever you are, whenever you are. It is the voice of non-fanatics, that is, to either wing politically, they're non-fanatics religiously, whatever the prevailing religion is. It is entertainment that is by and large non-upsetting, soothing, bland, and the closest it comes to being exciting at all is not enough to upset anyone. I still say one of the best examples in the Western world is a symphony. As much as it can be enjoyable, you do not see at the end, I don't care who it was. If they could revive Bernstein for one more time, and you think, I'd be amazed if they can at the end of the best thing you heard, people do not in a concert hall. And not just for the reasons you might think. Not just for the reason that the more regressive parts of society might accuse them of being. A whole planet of stealth and rigor mortis is set completely in. That's, those of you who don't remember, never mind. You do not see people jump up at the end of a symphony. No matter what your favorite is, you do not see them jump up, and you read in the paper the next day that the crowd got so out of hand that they had to call in fire hoses. That, people were storming and just having fits and begin slam dumping each other off the balconies down in the symphony hall. That is not his purpose. Now there are people who will literally say that, I can go to a good symphony, I get chills up and down, and I can't go home and go to sleep. And that's true. Or I go hear Pavarotti on a good night, and I have to go out and have a drink. I'm not even drinking, man, but I get so excited I can't even go home. But it's not so excited that people do not leave a Pavarotti concert. They do, and go out and riot in the streets like right after the Lakers win or Toronto wins the Stanley Cup or whatever. It is like the world of musical comedy, hyphenated musical comedy sports. It is all forms of entertainment all the way from that to religion. Mainstream religion now, though. No factions, no schisms, no cults. It is the middle class of society. So you've got those two forms of entertainment always overlapping. Now, as any time, as you people can probably do for yourself, especially if I set it up to start with, if I point out two things, there's a third one coming. Because if there's only two, hell, we might as well have a Baptist church or political rally or bingo. If it's either this or that. But you've got regressive, you've got dumbing entertainment. And it's not just an attack on it because, like I said, it gets gradual. Anytime you have a drink, anytime you sit down and have a drink, I don't care how much you enjoy a nice glass of amaretto, champagne, Nouveau Beaujolais when it comes out, if you're still that hip, assuming that's still hip. When you have a drink, you're engaged in dumbing entertainment. You are lowering your consciousness. Anytime you watch a movie that makes you go, ooh, or anytime you read a book that's about violence, that's about uncivilized behavior, and you respond to it, it is dumbing entertainment. It's the same thing as taking drugs. Same thing as you're dumbing. You're regressing yourself. And I don't mean it's critical. You've lived through it this far, so don't get the willies. But it is dumbing entertainment. It's what you're doing. And it is almost impossible. It is a natural part of being alive. In case you're ever worried about it. I assure you, whoever your hero was, I assure you that Mother Teresa every now and then picks up the National Enquirer. And if she had to, she could just, she could explain, well, I keep reading about them raping all the nuns in South America, and it makes me feel so bad, I've got to read about it to keep up what's going on. Yeah. It's like catching a minister at a strip joint doing research. What? I have to see what Satan's up to. I got to keep an eye on the enemy. Yeah. Hey, I like it. It's a good story. You don't see a man really dumbing himself, doing something terrible, and you ask him what his excuse is, and he didn't even listen to you. Never mind. That was one, again, from last week about a man who told his thoughts that those thoughts may only have good reasons who never give reasons. Everyone is engaged in some form. Everyone gets tired of being civilized because it is not a fait accompli. We're not totally civilized. That is why you have a continuing run of all the slash and burn journalists and all the National Enquirer stuff, all these TV shows now, they become the sensational pseudo-news shows, and it's always about who's been raped, who's been killed, all these terrible things. It's nothing new. You can find it, the same kind of stories written on the baths in Pompeii. It's a dumbing. It is a continual thing of, geez, I wish we wasn't so civilized. I wish I was wild. I wish I could grab any woman or man I wanted. I wish I could take somebody's food away from them rather than having to go grow it, buy it. So you've got dumbing entertainment, but you need to see it for what it is. And then you have got that which would slide over into the middle, that which is defensive entertainment, that which is the middle class of entertainment. The third, the question I presented rhetorically and now specifically, where is the entertainment in life that is truly inspiring, that would be truly encouraging, that would be futuristic, that would be impelling, that would actually propel, that would be inclined to drive somebody? Now, it's very easy if ordinary person were sitting here listening to this, a civilized ordinary person listening to this, and could say, well, symbolically or metaphorically, I hear some of that. Then they would want to say, well, wait a minute, you're saying where is the encouraging or the inspiring entertainment? They'd say, well, you just bypassed it. It would be in such things as, the person might say, now I'm not religious, but I'm pointing out how it is ordinary people. That in the middle class you do have religion, you do have symphonies, you do have art, you have education, you have philosophy. That I'm speaking now for this outside observer. They could say the very thing that you just got through talking about the middle class, that is right past the dumbing entertainment, the very thing you're talking about is where man is inspired. Subtle. Sneaky Pete. That is the best they have. But I suggest to you, since I made up the categories, I'm safe. It is supportive of the status quo. It's not encouraging. It is not inspiring, but it is as close as it gets, because, I'll repeat again, there are people who will say, and they're serious as they can be, they're sincere, they'll say, sometimes I can hear Schubert's Great Symphony, or I can listen to Beethoven's Ninth, or I can sit down and read just at random some Shakespeare. I can pick up the Bible, the Old Testament. Now, I'm not religious, but something like that, and I can read it. Especially maybe they might say nowadays something of New Age literature or something from the metaphysical realm. They can say, but some of what's available, I can hear it, I can read it, I can look at a painting, and I do feel somewhat inspired. I feel like I almost get the shivers. I do think life, I should be doing better. It just makes me feel like more heroic because of someone else's artistic endeavor, because of something that came from man's world of culture, religion, education. Again, it all dovetails. It's not just cut, but I'm telling you, and you people, it's not our intention to preach to the converted, because you got to be converted, or this doesn't sound like preaching anyway. Don't even write and tell me what it sounds like. I have enough trouble with all these. I wonder how many people get letters from guys with PhDs on their names written in thick pencil. Well, it's getting better. Years ago, it was all crayon, so at least I'm moving up. Now, it gets subtle. Because the ordinary entertainment, now you can obviously see the dumbing entertainment, as I'm calling it. And you can expect no more than that it's a temporary time out. The same way that if once a week or sometime you get drunk or you have 2 or 3 drinks and you have put your mind in a slasher movie. You have put your mind inside the pages of the National Star or something. It is a form of regressive. It's a dumbing form of entertainment. You get in the middle, that would be the rest of, we'll assume that you're a fairly sane person. Just an ordinary middle class. The rest of it, all that's available to you, is the supportive. It is a defensive. But an ordinary person would take the distinction I'm already making, and they would want to do what I was playing out this fictional other person's part. They would want to say, well, no. Don't keep saying where's the inspirational, where's the encouraging, because it's in the heart of man's civilization. That's what the great temples, the great cathedrals, speaking of architecture, are. That's what the great paintings, that's what the Rembrandts and the Titians, and that's what the sculptures are. That's what the histories are. They're encouraging. They inspire man. Subtle. Remember, it overlaps. It's not just me saying, no, it doesn't. But now the question is, to people like you, if that be true, then why are you screwing around with something like this? That was real crude. You've already had plenty of opportunity to go through schools, philosophy on your own, or with somebody else's help, education, paying someone else to do your research for you. At least I didn't say thinking for you. What is actually inspiring to someone who would be more conscious is not available. It is not out there in the mainstream. It is not even in the mainstream where the mainstream says, well, this is a little obscure, we're not sure this is true. It's not even available there. There is nothing available ordinarily that will in any way upset the status quo, not in any dangerous condition, in any threatening way. There is no such entertainment available. It is a different thing to be supportive of the status quo. It is one thing to understand what the status quo is. The status quo, if nothing else, is the stability of your lifetime. And if you got any sense, you're in favor of that. Of course, you got real sense. You're not sitting around biting your nails worrying about that within 200 years the greenhouse effect may wipe out the planet. That's for ordinary people in the parade. If you got any sense, I mean, it's obvious. 200 years, hey. I hate it, but give me a break. I'm trying to save up to get my transmission fixed, In this lifetime, what do I care in 200 years? Well, there's not entertainment. And if entertainment is still too obscure, information. But it's entertainment. There's not information that is available. I put it too rhetorically. I said, where is it? The inference being that it's not readily available, that actually inspires someone. Not with any religious connotation. I give you a broad spectrum that inspires, encourages, is futuristic, and is impelling. The last two really cover it. Without the futuristic, you're nowhere. Because it cannot be. See, ordinary people take the idea of improving themselves, remember. Not because I've said it several times, but you should be able to see it. Ordinary minds take the idea of improvement as simply being trying to fix themselves up. It's making repairs, is what they call self-improvement. You understand, that may be all right. That may get you through this 60 or 70 years. Of course, if you don't do anything, it may get you through the 60 or 70 years. Life prefers that not be pointed out. Too often, at least a few people go, that's true. And then first thing you know, you're writing slasher movies. You're contributing actively to the dumbing entertainment. There is nothing readily available that people can hear that is futuristic, that seems to be encouraging, that seems to be inspiring, because what they would want to say is inspiring is simply, straighten yourself up, damn it. Get back in the mainstream of the parade. Quit drinking so much, says a guy. It took me 10 years, knock on wood, and I haven't had a drink now. And damn close to, this will be nearly 15 months coming up. That is self-improvement. But now anyone more alert, that doesn't even come anywhere that's not in the ballpark. That doesn't come close to any kind of definition of improvement. I quit killing myself. I quit committing suicide, and I feel much better for it. Well, good. I mean, what else can you say? Well, I'm proud of you. If you didn't want to commit suicide totally and you stopped, then, hey, I'm all in favor of it. But for a man attempting to be more conscious, for a man attempting to understand what's going on, to call the cessation of suicidal tendencies self-improvement, you understand what a what a dumbing definition you have of self-improvement. That is, when I was born, if I got to make it obvious this way, the second I was born, you don't know the poor circumstances under which I grew up. I was so poor, my mother had to have, well, that's an old joke. But the second I was born, I was absolutely clean. I was on no drugs, no alcohol. I mean, I was straight. By the time I was 15, I was smoking 3 packs a day. Then I got on pot, and then from there I was on cocaine. I was one of the earliest cases, at least here in South Carolina, that I was a certifiable alcoholic and coke addict. I was one of the first ones to actually be diagnosed as both simultaneously. I worked on this for 15 years. I almost killed myself. 4 times doctors told me, you'll be dead. They'd bring me to the hospital and kind of straighten me out, dry me out, and they'd say, all right, one more bout like this and you'll be a dead man. I was told that 4 times by 4 famous doctors. And it took me, I was down there 45 years old till I finally quit. And now it's been, 14 months. Thank God. Well, fine. But you understand, how can you call that self-improvement that he's saying, I'm finally back, I'm off everything? You're off everything the second you were born. It only took me 45 years to get back at my place in the parade. That is not self-improvement. Now, stepping into my same pile of shit trying to warn you again, that is not an attack on people. That is not an attack on humanity. That's not an attack on Alcoholics Anonymous. That's not a criticism of anything. But do you see that passes in the ordinary world today, circa 1994, is being the epitome, the brilliant epitome of self-improvement. That a man nowadays, especially considering the horrendous weights, the social pressures under which all of us are subject, and how easy it is, how almost inevitable that we end up on some kind of drug, either prescription drug or Valiums or coke out in the street. And for a man to bend down that low and pull himself back up, by God, that is an example of what can be done to improve oneself. That, right now, and always has, but right now, I was just pointing out when and our condition, that passes as for a primo example of self-improvement. So where is the real encouragement? Where is the real inspirational entertainment? If that's the height of it, that is, it only took you 45 years to get back where you started, and that's self-improvement with ordinary people, not a critique. Yes, that's it. How much greater can a man do? If that's it, then back to my rhetorical question. Where is that information? Where is that entertainment that is actually futuristic and impelling, that which would drive somebody to the future? This drives people, in a sense, sequentially speaking, to the past. That's the only place they can look for self-improvement. If you ask an ordinary man, even if he's not on drugs, if he's not doing anything that would apparently is externally tied to some vice, and you said, wouldn't you like to improve yourself? And he goes, yes. And he says, but I don't have any bad habits. I don't know how to do it. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't even take caffeine. Well, I know you got a bad temper. Yeah, you're right. It's gotten worse over the years. If he tries his best, he looks for something. Well, I want to improve myself. All he can do is look to the past. He cannot look to the future because there's nothing to talk to him about the future. The truth being, of course, ordinary people have no ear for it. It's not because it's not out there. They've got no ear for it. But as you go through life, friends, swell up the organ, bring the organ music up, get the choir ready. As you trot through life, making your way, look around you and realize that you're faced with either the National Enquirer, the Koran, or the Bible, whatever you want, some New Age book, or look ahead and you need a ladder. Because if you stand down here at street level, the horizon always looks for boating. The horizon always, in fact, seems to have a sign saying, look back behind you, and you look. The horizon has strict limitations. That is the end of entertainment. That is the end of the information available at ordinary level, ground level. To hear anything else, you've got to stand on a ladder. Good night.